Brad's going to open up with a quick couple comments, and we'll open up to questions.
Yeah, well, first of all, appreciate everybody coming in. I think the majority of this will, from my standpoint, will focus on, what we just went through, the season and everything else. And I know there will be a lot of questions about what's next, but, I'll talk probably more about that at the draft time when we have a better idea after meeting with all the key stakeholders and everybody else about what next steps might be, right? At the end of the day, I think that will all be driven by the same thing that's always driven us, and that is how do we get ourselves in the mix to compete for championships best. And I think that we'll have more clarity as we take a deep breath, get a little bit more sleep than we have the last 3 nights, and then figure out how to be the best version of ourselves here moving forward.
Questions? Dan?
Brad, I'd just like to start with a guy like Jaylen Brown, who has won a title, has a contract, whatever, had his issues, maybe starting in March. How impressed were you with what he did? It just the gameness that he showed, that he wanted to play and continued to play, even if he's got a situation going on with his knee.
Yeah, no, listen, the good news is, I think, first of all, Jaylen wants to play. Jaylen's a competitor. Jaylen's a warrior. Jaylen, takes great pride in being out there. And at the same time, we also, he saw obviously our team docs and a couple of other people, and as he even said a couple of weeks ago, the knee's in a good place structurally, and so I think he felt comfortable getting out there and going after it, and hopefully he'll feel better after being off of it for a couple of weeks here. That's the unfortunate part, is we're done in middle of May, but some of these guys have some nicks, bruises, and other things that, it'd be good to get some rest.
Brad, what is do you know a treatment at this point for Jaylen to play in there? And what is the outlook now going forward for him and Jayson health-wise?
I think for everything Jaylen said to me and said here, I think that what I just said is probably the outlook. I mean, what was reported this weekend, that's been something he's had for a while, and it's been stable, and he's played with it, and so that's been several scans through and through. So we've known that for a long time, and he's known that for a long time, and but it just tells you these guys they care, they care about winning, they care about playing well, and again, I think that'll probably, he'll drive that, but certainly, we're thankful for how much and how hard he's played, but he was definitely experiencing some discomfort there in March. But you guys all watched it in the last couple of weeks. I thought it got better and better and better, and I think he actually felt better. At least he told me he felt better at the end of the Knicks series.
And obviously, it's going to be a longer span of time without Jayson here. How do you anticipate sustaining through that, and how big of a part is Jaylen in kind of having some stability next year as Jayson's going to be out? Yeah,
I mean, those guys have been the core parts of this whole program for a while, and so there's no question about that. And those guys are they've achieved so much, and certainly deserve all the recognition and praise and accolades they get, but yeah, that's a huge part of us being the best version of ourselves.
Hey, Brad. For next season, you guys have a historic amount kind of committed to the core plays. I know it's a unique situation, as you alluded to, with the transition. When do you expect to have an indication of what your limitations, if any, you'll have for next season?
We'll talk about all that stuff in the next few weeks.
is that like, how tough is it? There's not just that uncertainty then right now, not having kind of indication on that front?
Listen, we've been talking about this for years, right? I mean, the CBA has been well known for years, and so there are penalties associated with being at certain levels, and we know that. And you just weigh that. You weigh where we are, you weigh everything else, and then you make those decisions. But those are, you have to have the clarity of a full season and a full playoffs, and like I said, a couple of good nights sleep, and everybody gets in a room and put your heads together and figure out what's next.
Brad, how much did Jayson's injury, how much does that impact what you are about to embark on this summer?
I think anytime you're talking about an injury like that, I think it's another piece of information that you have to ingest and figure out how that affects you moving forward, both next year and in the future.
And with the collective bargaining agreement, we all talk about second apron and blah, blah, blah. But what about the other end where teams that normally had cap space, where you would normally be able to say, hey, salary dumps, those don't exist the way they used to anymore. How much does the lack of that kind of trading partner impact what kind of moves that you have to make?
Again, we'll talk about all that stuff at draft. I'll have a better idea about all that stuff. But I would say that we have a bunch of really good players, and they're obviously under contract, and we want to first look at everything that we have here, and again try to be the best version of ourselves here.
Brad, with everything Kristaps had to go through down the stretch of that season there, how tough was it to watch him have to go through that, especially considering, like you said, all the decisions you guys are going to have to make this summer and everything? And two, was there ever any clarity as to what exactly was going on? Or?
Yeah, no, I don't think anybody was more frustrated than him. And, I felt for him because he, the way it was described to me was just post-viral syndrome, which is just, lingering effects of a long illness. And, I think we've seen that and probably all read too much about that over the last several years. But I think that, unfortunately, I thought he had really turned the corner there towards the end of the regular season. When we went to Madison Square Garden, he was so good. And then even in the first round. And then for whatever reason, he just didn't feel as good there early in the Knicks series and never really felt great. Now, in the middle of a playoff series where you play every other day, it's not an ideal situation to feeling better, especially with the travel and everything else and the amount of, physical, force these guys put on their bodies. So, our expectation is that it'll probably be the next couple weeks will do him good to be off, but, he's going to play for Latvia. I think that's a good thing. I think it's good to be playing in Eurobasket and I'm sure it'll be well cleared up by then.
You mentioned that it popped up right at the end of the regular season or right before the postseason. Was there anything that triggered him not feeling well again, or was it just out of the blue he just started feeling bad?
Just out of the blue.
Gary, then Adam.
Brad, you guys have made the playoffs every year since 15 and been 7 or 8 Eastern Conference Finals. With your ego, in terms of you want to build a championship contender every year, but is there something that says, with the new CBA, with all the restrictions, with Jayson's injury, maybe have to take a step back? There could be, are you in the brass? Were you kind of pointing to eventually we're going to have to take a step back? Eventually, how does that go when you want to tell Boston that they're going to have a championship contender every year, but that might not be sustainable?
Yeah, and I think the way that you say it is the North Star is to have a championship contender. Right. And so you have to you have to do what's best to give yourself the best opportunity to do that when you can do that. And so we just have to look at it all and decide, how feasible that is on any given year. And then, make sure that we are, we're making the decisions accordingly. But the reality is like I said, we have a lot of good players. We're in a unique situation. They're all under contract. And obviously, as you pointed out, there are, several basketball penalties that will come with that amount of salary. And so we just have to weigh it all and make those decisions. And again, I'll have more clarity after we meet and talk and go through it.
But is that possible to continue every year under the restrictions to have a championship contender, or do you have to?
I never put a ceiling on a group of players. So, some years you put a group together that you think has a better chance than others, but we'll see how it all looks. But my goal is always and will always be to try to best position us to compete for championships.
Adam and Zach.
Brad, you obviously helped Jayson off the court there. It sounds like you were with him afterward with the surgery and everything. What was that kind of time period like, helping him get through such a difficult moment, and how has he kind of gone through it, the mental aspect of it right now, and how do you expect it to kind of progress physically over these next few months?
Obviously that's hard, super hard for Jayson. I mean, more than anybody, as has been well documented, he loves to play. And I think even missing 2 games has been, grueling for him. And so we know that there's a long road ahead, and that there's going to be several steps that he'll have to take before he ultimately gets back out on the court. But the positive was we were 15 minutes away from, Dr. O'Malley, who is a terrific surgeon who has done a number of these. And Dr. Shenna was on the phone with him before we left the building on Monday night. And he was out of the MRI and consultation and done with surgery by the time we had an injury report the next day, because of there was real benefit to doing it early. And so it was as tough as that injury is and as tough as it was that night, just an amazing set of circumstances and an amazing thank you from our organization to, all of the, Dr. O'Malley, the nurses at HSS and everybody there, and the hotel that we were staying in and the accommodations they made Jayson feel comfortable in. And just I thought it was about as good of a transition and about a bleak, of a feeling as you could have.
And just when you look back at that series against New York, how do you kind of assess what do you think was missing? What do you think went wrong over the course of that series?
I'd rather talk about all the CBA and all that crap, but
You said no questions about that.
no, I know, but that's the first 10 questions were on it. You guys are terrible students. Listen, the reality is we blew the first two games, right? And that's why we put ourselves in a tough spot. I realize, and we all realize, listen, these leads go fast, these games go fast, but we had our opportunities, and so yes, you can win when you're down 2-0, but you've just diminished your margin for error, because there's going to be games like ours in Game 5 where we go nuts and we're hard to beat that night, or ours in Game 3 where we're hard to beat that night, but that just ties it. You still have to do that 2 more times. And so, that's not on any one person. That's not out of a maliciousness. That's not like a bad decision. It's not like bad luck. We had opportunities to win those first 2 home games, and we put ourselves behind the 8 ball. And New York gained what I thought was not only confidence but momentum, and they are peaking. You can see it. And so, I think all 4 teams that are playing in these semifinals deserve to be there, and any of the 4 could win it. But credit New York for the way they played and the way they came back in those 2 games specifically.
Yeah, Brett, a bit of a repeat, I guess, but just curious, looking back and assessing this season, to you, what were the factors that prevented this team from ultimately reaching the end goal that last year's team was able to?
Well, I mean, again, sometimes it's as simple as those are the margins, what I just mentioned, for winning and losing. We lost an overtime game at home in Game 1 and a game by 1 point in Game 2 that, we were up 16, 18, 20 with 15 minutes to go in the game. So that's the margin of error that you're dealing with. And so I think that those are all things that, you appreciate when you can go on deep runs like we did last year and ultimately win it, because some things have to go your way. I've said many times, we could easily have been up 3-1 when Jayson got hurt. But the reality is, we were probably not winning that game anyway, so we were going to be down 3-1. Last year in the Indiana series, they could have easily been up 3-1 on us. And I think that that's just kind of these series. You get these opportunities, and one team takes advantage of them, and that team usually moves on. And the Knicks did that. And again, they deserve credit for that. They've been amazing late in games, and certainly played a lot of those in the Detroit series and showed it against us.
Brad, when the guys were leaving this week, over the last couple of days, they've been kind of seem to understand the circumstances this offseason. Have there been any conversations about what's to come, or do they just kind of understand it?
I think when we do exit meetings here, we do just get together as a team, do a quick 10-minute thank you, and then hug, and everybody goes their own direction and takes a deep breath, just like I said about our staff. And so, but all of those guys are, have been told my door's open, my phone's on, anything that I can do to talk through anything as we continue to move forward. I'm always open to that. And listen, we have an amazing group of guys. This is what makes it hard when you come up short, is because, and people, I know people say that all the time, but the character in the room is just incredible. They are, and they're the kind of guys that, they can go in any gym, anywhere, and win any one game. We just didn't do it enough.
Brad, with Jaylen Brown potentially being without Tatum for most, if not all, of next season, what is your confidence level in his ability to kind of keep you guys afloat and lead you guys and be as competitive as possible without the guy that's kind of been by his side for most of his career?
Well, I think, first of all, and I know that we always talk in terms of superstars, and don't talk in terms necessarily of the other 13 players, right? And so the reality is we have a ton of good players, and everyone leans on everyone. That said, Jaylen and Jayson have gotten the majority of attention because of how good they are, and I have full faith that any game that you have those guys on the court, or one of those guys on the court, you have a great shot. And so I have full faith in Jaylen.
You brought up the 3 sleepless nights. What has been the process for you guys as you sort of recalibrate after the last week and a half with Jayson's injury and then losing to the Knicks? How does the front office get together and kind of work things through after something that really probably is going to shift the way you think, or at least has the potential to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you talk when you're in this role, you talk, big picture, branches, and long term all the time. But then, at the end of each season, you glean a little more clarity from the season that just happened and what happened during it, right? So again, I like to give everybody a few days to take a deep breath, because you don't want to make decisions that are rash or emotional. And we've got a lot to sift through and sort out and think about, and we'll do that. So there'll be a lot of us in the room, and we'll take the time over the next, couple of weeks to do that.
Do you believe that championship windows are shrinking, especially under this CBA, even compared to the latter half of this decade?
That's a good question. I don't know, but I think it's it's something that I think, I think certainly it is more challenging if you in certain circumstances, for sure.
Hey, Brad, obviously you mentioned you'll plan through things through the draft. I'm just wondering, how does the draft, I guess, the prep for it fundamentally maybe change just because of the things you guys are going to have to make decisions on, just, having the 2 picks coming up here?
I don't think it changes at all for us. We'll evaluate who we think will be available at 28 and 32. We just got done with 2 draft workouts today, and so we'll have plenty of time to thoroughly evaluate who we think those people might be, and if we want to try to move up, try to move back, whatever. We'll see how it kind of all goes. But nothing. I think when you're at 28 and 32, there's nothing. You're not exactly able to pinpoint exactly how that night's going to go.
Brad, I'm curious your thoughts about the difference in style of play between the regular season and the playoffs.
Yeah, I think it's pretty significant.
Yeah. So is that good, bad? Like, it feels like you've played 82 games under one style.
Oh, you're talking about our style?
No, I'm talking about just the NBA. I'm talking about your style. I mean, it could be anything, but I'm talking about the officiating is different. Certain things are allowed, not allowed. It feels like the style of play in the regular season, 82 games, was one thing, and the playoffs across the board have been kind of like a different style of basketball, and maybe that impacts your style of play. How do you see that? Do you think that something should be more consistent between the two, whichever way?
Well, no. I don't want this misconstrued by any means. There absolutely no excuses. Both teams are playing under the same set of guidelines with the same whistles and everything else. So that is what it is. But it's clearly more physical. And I think that, a lot of us as we watch it probably like that. But there's a line, and I think that, in the Orlando series especially, I thought that I'm not sure that if we played 82 games like that anybody would be left. But I think that, we just have to. My biggest thing as a league is making sure we don't, we give the defenders the right to hold their ground. First and foremost, you have to have the right to hold your ground. But I think we've gotten back to a lot of the grabbing and holding that, makes it harder to move. And so hopefully, those things get ironed out. I know our officiating groups in the NBA work on that all the time, and that's not it's not an excuse at all for us. I'm not sure that we were hurt by it nor benefited from it. I just think that we got beat. So, but I do think that it is more physical.
I wasn't trying to make an excuse for you guys, but as a talent evaluator, as a person who's evaluating what kind of team to build, you can build a team
linebackers.
That's right. I mean, you're building a team for the regular season. Or the play, if there's two styles of play, does it
always
change?
Yeah, you're always thinking that. You're always thinking that way. Listen, when the rotations shrink in the playoffs, which not everybody's shrunk. I mean, I think there's some teams that are playing probably more guys than normal, and I think that all of that is stuff to look at. But when the rotations shrink generally, I think it's largely because, there is an even increased intensity level, right? There's an increased physicality level, whether, no matter what is said. And you just have to match that, and the very best athletes match that, right? And so that. And so, you're thinking about, everybody has these discussions all year where, that's a person that's in our top 7 or 8 or 9 in a rotation. That's a playoff. You could see that playing in the playoffs. And then there's other guys that you think, okay, we want them to work up to that, or maybe we think they can get up to that. And that's a real thing.
Brad, with everything that's gone on in the coaching world, the last couple months, Michael Malone in Denver, Taylor Jenkins in Memphis, it feels like there's never been a time where there's more uncertainty than there is now. So I'm curious, as someone who was in that world for so long, what do you make of this new era of how quickly coaches get fired at weird times? And then two, how pleased have you been with Joe for the past 3 years?
Yeah, Joe's great. Joe's done a great job. I don't think anyone in coaching ever thought it was certain. So I think uncertainty is what you sign up for in some ways. But listen, there's so many things that go into winning and losing, and coaching's part of it, right? But playing circumstances, injuries, whatever the case may be. There's so many things, and so that's why I think it's so important to I know how hard their jobs are, and I've felt for Taylor and for Mike, and obviously talked to both of them, and but every year, good coaches get let go, and they're way better than everybody talks about them. I'm just telling you because I coached against them. They're way better than everybody thinks or knows. So, but that's the reality of our situation because that's the way the world works. And there's other coaches that are really good too that'll get their opportunities. And but yeah, we're lucky that we have Joe here. We're lucky that we have the staff we have here, and we're thankful.
Brad, you got 28 and 32 with the draft.
We do.
There's
right now.
Yeah, right now. There's rumors that you talked to two guys, one who's projected to go number one, you've interviewed, and the other one's another lottery pick. Do you expect around the league fireworks to kind of happen on draft night? You said get back to you on draft night. Do you expect the draft will be able to determine some things?
So the way that this does, we can rank who we want to talk to, and the people we know we can't get in to work out is how we decide who we want to talk to at the combine. Otherwise, we may never get to talk to them again. So the only people that'll come in and work out for us are people that think they're between, in our range, or maybe they're at the bottom end of our range, or whatever the case may be. So that doesn't really have anything to do with any of that. Will there be fireworks on draft night? I can't imagine, but again, who knows? I wouldn't guess with us, no.
But in terms of there's a player in Milwaukee who might be moved. There's a lot of stuff that go on. Could eventually, you want to speak, but that you could be a part of. You could jump in. Is that something you have to look out for?
I think generally, one of the concerns with the new CBA was it might limit trade activity or movement, and I don't know. I don't think necessarily in the big picture that's the case. I think they're no specifics at all. But I wouldn't be surprised to see movement continue to happen across the league. But, as far as us and moving up to those levels in the draft, I would guess that probably is not on the table.
All right. Thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
Everybody.